He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
Wordplay, activate. Why you always cynical? Hit you with some change just so I can knock some sense in you. If you paid attention, it would cost you just a penny for your thoughts, and now I'm spreading like the gossip in your middle school. We in a mental prison, convicted of repetition. You only empowered till you power on your television. We in a decade where everybody is sensitive, and if you get offended, you raise attention till tensions build it. If it ain't politically correct, it's when you make waves. I smile on the wave so I can try to change your wavelength. Look, you chemically imbalanced and you probably depended on medicine. It puts the harm into pharmacy. You introducing toxicity to our bodies with the food and the water you provide us, and this is comedy. That you trust the FDA as they work along with Big Pharma to poison us, diagnose us, prescribe us to begin profiting. We've been brought up by the world's elites and the blood runs deep. It's a new world order. Somebody wake me please from the American dream. I said we've been brought up by the world's elites and the blood runs deep. It's a new world order. Somebody wake me please. I've been studying statistics like an economist. The truth is in the water.
Well. Welcome back to a weekend episode of the Ministry of Truth. And I've just pretty much, since yesterday was a day in history nobody seems to remember. Well, I'm not going to say nobody. A lot of us remember. And today, obviously, is Hitler's birthday, Columbine, and well, I'm not worried about today because I believe today will end up being an amazing day. And I hope my thoughts are right, and it involves the rebirth of a nation that involves a specific black book. But we're not going to talk about that today because, well, that would make, well, I'm not talking about fucking Nazis or whatever, Hitler, whatever. We're going to go back in history. It's like a line of things. I totally forgot to add the Bundy Ranch, but, I can always add that later. We're going to get a brief overview of what started in Idaho, ended up in Oklahoma City. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you today a trio of Ruby Ridge, Waco, and the Oklahoma City bombing. Now, last time I did one on Waco, I think it was Waco, maybe it was Ruby Ridge. They pretty much took that video down, and we'll see what happens this time, because I don't fucking care. This is just a quick overview. We're going to do Oklahoma City, Waco today, and then we'll do Oklahoma City, because I think that's the only one I really haven't covered in depth.
7 days in August 1992, the country stood in amazement as they watched nonstop coverage of federal government agencies, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms,
Shot the
U.S.
man's
Marshal
dog.
Service, and
Where you fucked
Federal
up.
Bureau of Investigation, with local law enforcement surround a small cabin and a standoff in the mountains of Idaho.
Does sound
When
okay?
it was over, 3 people would be dead, and a government-fed media spin machine went into hyperdrive to try and make sense of what had happened at a place called Ruby Ridge. Who was Randy Weaver? Why was he targeted by the federal government and the Justice Department?
Because he was making sawed-off shotguns.
What really happened
which is
at Ruby Ridge?
totally legal.
Why was the federal government held liable for its actions?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton,
Hello,
veteran of
Colin.
the United States Army and Marine Corps,
former history professor, book author, and welcome to this
Look at
episode
those
of Forgotten
rifles.
History. Randy Weaver was one of 4 children born to Clarence and Wilma Weaver, a farming couple in Villisca, Iowa, on January 3, 1948. The family grew up as devout Christians and had some difficulty finding a denomination that matched their views, so they often moved around amongst evangelical, Presbyterian, and Baptist churches. After graduating from Jefferson High School in 1966,
Absolutely,
Weaver
Yeti.
attended
I totally
Iowa Central
believe.
Community
I
College for
100%
2
agree with this
years.
comment.
In 1968, he dropped out to enlist in the United States Army during the height of the Vietnam War. He was stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, where he attended the Demolitions Combat Engineer course conducted by the Special Forces, and he was discharged in 1971, having never served in Vietnam or seen combat.
Well, that's interesting.
Randy Weaver and Vicki Jordison married in a ceremony at the First Congregationalist Church in Fort Dodge, Iowa, in November 1971. Weaver dropped out after 1 semester while attending the University of Northern Iowa after he landed a well-paying job at the nearby John Deere tractor factory. His
Oh,
wife
sweet.
Vicki worked first as a secretary and then as a homemaker. Vicki Weaver
Homemaker's
was a
a pretty
firm
good job
believer
for a
in the
woman.
apocalypse factor and wanted the family to move away from Maine society, so they purchased a 20-acre property in remote Boundary County, Idaho for $5,000 in 1983 and built a cabin.
$5,000.
They also believed that
Shit.
interracial marriages were an affront and held strong Christian identity beliefs, believing that Jews were impostors and white Protestants are the true descendants of Israel.
I'm sorry. What did you say? I misheard that.
Jews were impostors and white Protestants, Christian identity beliefs, believing that Jews were impostors and white
Oh.
Protestants are the true descendants of Israel.
Oh.
That Jews were
Oh.
impostors and white Protestants are the true descendants of Israel. Weaver also sought a life of solitude and became a self-proclaimed separatist from the federal government. Weaver testified about his racial beliefs before a U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee in 1995, saying, "I am not a hateful racist as most people understand it, but I believe in the separation of races. We wanted to be separate from the rest of the world, to live in a remote area, to give our children a good place to grow up." Weaver became friends with many members of the Aryan nations. Though he never joined the group, he was often a visitor at their compound in Hayden Lake, Idaho in the late 1980s. Aryan nations were already on the federal government's watch list, much like the Ku Klux Klan before it was destroyed in courts and by lawsuits.
Get out.
In 1988, Weaver decided to run for county sheriff using the slogan, "Get out of jail free," and he was a believer that Americans should not pay federal taxes.
Absolutely.
Weaver then had a property dispute with a neighbor who went to the Boundary County Sheriff and gave a statement, saying that Weaver had made verbal violent threats against President Ronald Reagan and the governor of Idaho,
Really?
among others. This eventually led to the Secret Service interviewing Weaver, something he was very unhappy about and made him even more reclusive and angry at the government. In 1989, Weaver met undercover ATF agent Kenneth Fadley, who used the alias Gus Macasano at a meeting of the white supremacist group Aryan Nations. According to the government, after a friendship of 3 years, Weaver
don't get me
agreed
for
to sell
hate speech.
Fadley 2
Again.
sawed-off shotguns, and was recorded on tape saying he could supply Fadley with 4 or 5 illegal shotguns a week. It was a trap. In December 1990, Weaver received felony weapons charges in connection with the 1989 transaction. During this period, the Weaver family relocated from a house they were renting into another cabin near Ruby Ridge, Idaho, in the Selkirk Mountains.
Dude, it's a great place to
In
build.
January
it.
1991, 3 federal agents posed as stranded motorists near Weaver's home and, with the county sheriff, arrested him and brought him in for arraignment when he approached to offer assistance. Weaver's court date was set for February 19,
dirty
1991,
tactics right
and
there.
he was released on bond. The court date would later be rescheduled for February 20th, 1991 instead. However, a letter sent to Weaver by a probation officer mistakenly listed the date as March 20th, 1991, which meant that Weaver never received the accurate court date. The feds then told Weaver that the gun charges would go away if he became an informant against the Aryan nations. Already distrusting of the government, Weaver refused the deal and informed the Aryan nations. Vicky Weaver was incensed and wrote to U.S. Attorney Maurice O. Ellsworth, addressing him as servant of the Queen of Babylon, and she wrote, "The stink of your lawless government has reached heaven, the abode of Yahweh, our Yahshua. And
Yahweh!
whether we live or whether we die, we will not bow to your evil commandments." She also wrote letters to law enforcement and any government agencies threatening violence if they trespassed on their property or take any action against the family. She was particularly concerned about the authority figures who might come and try to take her children. Weaver had made it clear that he had a 300-yard radius kill zone around his property, and anyone within sight ignoring the no trespassing signs around his home without his permission would be fired upon.
Absolutely.
While he never actually attacked anyone like this, he was very open about it and apparently serious. Not long afterward, on August 21st, 1992, deputies of the United States Marshal Service arrived to arrest Weaver under a bench warrant for failure to appear on the firearms charge, thus beginning the 11-day standoff. A key point was that Weaver was never asked to surrender. He stayed inside the cabin with his family and friend Kevin Harris. Due to the suspicion that there could be persons held hostage inside the cabin, Federal Bureau of Investigation hostage rescue team was brought in.
Uh-oh.
At the time of the Ruby Ridge siege, the Weavers had 4 children, Sarah 16, Samuel 14, Rachel 10, and Elisheba 10 months old. Vicky homeschooled the children.
Okay.
The situation grew even more tense as the national, then worldwide media became aware of the situation, and the Attorney General was under pressure to conclude the situation quickly. While doing a reconnaissance of the property, 6 of the marshals encountered Harris and young Sam Weaver in the woods near the cabin. A shootout then took place, and as to who fired first became a great controversy.
Doesn't really matter if
Marshals
you're on the
shot,
property.
and Art Roderick killed the Weaver's dog Stryker,
You motherfucker.
then shot again, and there was confusion on who shot young Sam Weaver in the back as he ran away, killing him.
Coward.
During the firefight, Harris returned fire and shot Deputy U.S. Marshal William Francis Deegan in the chest, killing him. Then, on August 22, 1992, FBI sniper observers with the hostage rescue team arrived at Ruby Ridge. They were issued with their special rules of engagement, allowing them to shoot any armed adult male exiting the cabin. That day, FBI sniper Lon Horiyuchi was concealed 200 yards from the cabin. Horiyuchi fired when he believed Weaver and Harris were preparing to shoot at an FBI helicopter. The first shot hit Randy Weaver in the arm. Horiyuchi fired a second shot meant for Harris as the men ran back into the cabin. The bullet struck 43-year-old Vicky Weaver in the face while she held her infant daughter behind the front door of the cabin and also injured Harris. Vicky Weaver died soon after, but her body remained in the cabin for 11 days. Horiyuchi later claimed that he never knew she was there, but a sketch he doodled on hotel stationery the day after the shooting appeared to show that he was aware there was another person near the door.
Uh-oh.
The next day, the HRT, unaware that they had killed Vicky Weaver the previous day, asked via megaphone on the third morning what she, meaning Vicky, and the kids had for breakfast in a way that came up as completely ghoulish to the Weaver family, who thought the HRT knew what they had done. The FBI and marshals brought in Green Beret war hero Bo Greitz as a negotiator. His efforts convinced Weaver to allow Harris to receive medical attention, and he was subsequently arrested on August 30th. Greitz also convinced Randy Weaver and his 3 daughters to surrender also, which they did the next day. Weaver was charged with 10 major crimes, including murder for the death of the Deputy U.S. Marshal Deegan, conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to violate federal firearms laws, assault, etc. A total of 10 counts. Famed cowboy attorney Jerry Spence was Weaver's defense attorney, and he successfully argued that Weaver's actions were justifiable as self-defense. Spence did not call any witnesses for the defense, rather focusing on attacking the credibility of FBI agents and forensic technicians.
Good.
The judge in the case later dismissed 2 counts after hearing prosecution witness testimony, which was conflicting on the events, as well as the fact that it came to light that Weaver had been approached by ATF agent Kenneth Fadley, who asked Weaver to supply the shotguns. That was entrapment, and the charges associated with that event the judge had set aside. Critics said that the very strict rules of engagement were altered during the Ruby Ridge siege, relaxed to the point to force FBI snipers to shoot unarmed adults. Larry Potts, demoted from the Bureau's No. 2 position, and 4 other FBI officials were suspended pending a criminal investigation into whether they covered up evidence that the deadly force rules were changed during the siege. Weaver was found guilty of the 1-count failure to appear, for which he was fined $10,000 and sentenced to 18 months in prison, but he was credited with time served, having awaited trial for 14 months in jail, plus an additional 3 months, and he was then released. His friend, Kevin Harris, was acquitted of all criminal charges. The legal fallout from public pressure was like an avalanche, mainly because it was an election year. An inquiry by the Justice Department criticized the FBI for failing to gather sufficient intelligence and for not ordering the residents of the cabin to surrender before engaging them in a firefight. It also concluded that Horiyuchi's second shot was unconstitutional because Harris and Weaver were running for cover and could not be considered imminent threats, and both men were unarmed at the time. The inquiry further alleged that Horiyuchi unnecessarily endangered others by firing at the door of the cabin. But the U.S. Attorney General decided that there would be no criminal charges against Horiyuchi. However, local prosecutors in Boundary County, Idaho, charged Horiyuchi with involuntary manslaughter.
Good.
The case was moved to a federal district court, which dismissed the charges against Horiyuchi on the grounds that he was immune from prosecution because he was acting in his official capacity.
Oh. So that means Donald Trump shouldn't be able to be tried because he's working in his official capacity to deport illegal aliens, like he said he would.
An appeals court affirmed the district court's ruling, but a second en banc or fuller complement of judges panel reversed that decision and required that Horiyuchi stand trial. Before a third, larger en banc panel could be convened to consider that decision, the state of Idaho announced that it was dropping charges, and all 3 earlier rulings were vacated.
It's crazy.
These events also led to some demotions and suspensions of various people in the FBI, including HRT Commander Richard Rogers, who was also in command at Waco.
No need for an
no charges were filed against anyone in the government except Lon Horiyuchi for manslaughter, and those charges were eventually dropped after several years of legal wrangling back and forth. The event at Ruby Ridge became a global news story, and a clarion call to millions who believed that the federal government was exercising too much power without enough constitutional oversight, especially where the Second Amendment was concerned. Weaver was interviewed by New York Times reporter Ken Fusen in 1995, where he expressed his regret about not appearing in court for his 1991 gun charge, saying, "I'm not totally without fault in this." In August 1995, the U.S. government, in order to avoid a highly publicized trial on the civil lawsuit filed by the Weavers, settled out of court and awarding the 3 surviving daughters $1 million each and Randy Weaver $100,000 over the deaths of Sammy and Vicki Weaver. His family eventually received a total of $3.1 million in compensation for the killing of his wife and son by federal agents. In 1998, Weaver published his own book, titled The Federal Siege at Ruby Ridge, in our own words, where he toured gun shows and sold autographed books. In 1999, he married legal secretary Linda Gross in Jefferson, Iowa. Apparently, the event at Ruby Ridge had altered Weaver's outlook on many things.
No shit.
On June 18, 2007, Weaver participated in a press conference with tax protesters Edward and Elaine Brown on the front porch of their home in Plainfield, New Hampshire. He told the assembled group, quote, "I ain't afraid of dying no more. I'm curious about the afterlife. And I'm an atheist."
Oh.
The story became a major part of the anti-government political landscape and popular entertainment. A CBS miniseries about the Ruby Ridge incident titled Ruby Ridge, An American Tragedy aired on May 19th and 21, 1996.
I didn't know there was a movie.
It was based on the book Every Knee Shall Bow by journalist Jess Walter. It starred Laura Dern as Vicky, Kirsten Dunst as Sarah, and Randy Quaid as Randy Weaver, and Bill Gunton as Bo Greitz. Later that year, the television series was adapted into a full-length TV movie, The Siege at Ruby Ridge. The documentary Ruby Ridge was released by Reality Productions Group for the Learning Channel television in 2000. The documentary includes interviews with Randy and Rachel Weaver, FBI Site Commander Eugene Glenn, hostage rescue team negotiator Fred Lansley, civilian negotiators Bug Greitz, and Jackie Brown. Randy Weaver died on May 11, 2022, aged 74, after a month-long illness.
COVID.
Thank you for watching Forgotten History. Please.
You guys think that month-long illness was COVID, since they did say 2022? I mean, that's a good thing for the FBI, because now they can, that never happened, I promise. Hold on, why is this one in this place? Okay.
The 2 cattle trailers for a surprise.
Ready for it? Let's see if CNN wants to block me. I had to pick a different one.
The standoff's been going on about 45 minutes now. The alcohol and tobacco people apparently have telephone contact with somebody in the compound.
My name is David Koresh.
And my name is David Koresh.
To his followers, David Koresh was a messiah.
God speaks to me. Manifestation of God in the flesh.
We believe this man had the truth.
But to the U.S. government, David Koresh was a threat.
Machine guns and explosive devices.
In 1993, they went to war in Waco.
This ain't America anymore when the ATF has that kind of power.
Get 'em.
It ended in catastrophe. 86 people dead,
Oh,
including
trigger
at least
warning?
24 children.
There'd been nothing like this before. This siege was new and unique in American law enforcement history.
If you distrust the government, Waco is going to be symbolic to a lot of people of what they really fear.
I'm talking to you.
Me?
Somebody's gonna get hurt. If he asks God for some kind of sign and God gives it, what does that mean?
Every Saturday morning, Clive Doyle and Sheila Martin study the Bible.
Behold, the Lord God will come with strong hand, his arm shall rule for him. Behold,
They are about all that's left in Waco of the Branch Davidians,
he's basically over the king.
an offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The religious community went back generations. It even issued its own currency during the Great Depression. David Koresh came to the faith and its Texas commune in 1981.
Who was he back then, to you?
Just a bum.
The bomb.
Former Branch Davidian Kathy Jones and her husband David had seen religious visionaries come and go.
God speaks to me.
This time was different. Koresh would preach his way to power.
I remember in the beginning, everybody was like, oh, he's crazy, you know, he's this and that. Now, I mean, that's all I heard. And all of a sudden, people were like, well, we're listening to him. He has a message.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The message was a spellbinding account of Revelation, the New Testament's final book.
Revelation 14 gives its message.
Koresh claimed that he alone could explain the book's mysterious verses about a final battle between the armies of God Almighty and Satan.
Oh.
I mean, there are some things that God has concealed in His written word that are to be brought to view right before the end of time.
I confronted him, yes.
Branch Davidian Charles Pace says he warned church elders in 1984 that Koresh was a disaster waiting to happen.
Are they going to follow God or are they going to follow a man?
The elders chose
Kind of the same
Koresh.
thing, isn't it?
So God's a rock of offense and a stone of stumbling.
The scriptures just flowed out of his mouth.
Peter says to those who believe not the word.
He just seemed to know so many things and knew how to explain them.
Take it from Isaiah, referring to Messiah. I, the children, Lord, have given me for signs and wonders in Israel.
Like, if you think about
My
it,
children learned how to swim in this.
God, as they say, or Jesus. Jesus was a man, and they followed him, and they still follow him, as he's a man. Oh, okay.
Pool.
Sheila Martin came to the 77-acre compound in 1985. Her husband, Wayne, was a Harvard Law graduate. They brought their 6 children.
I thought at first it was just going to be a sunny day. Just walk into the kingdom one day and bring my family, and we'll live forever through eternity, believing in the scriptures and doing the things that God wanted.
When it comes to religious matters, you're always learning.
Clive Doyle came to Waco on his way from Australia to Israel. He ultimately stayed to study scripture with David Koresh.
Did you say Israel?
As his message developed,
That's twice.
we came to see him as more than just a prophet.
A Messiah.
Right. Manifestation of God in the flesh.
Koresh added a twist to his message in 1989, declaring only he could have sex. All the other Branch Davidian men would be celibate.
Yeah, fuck that.
Even
I'm out.
married men. Koresh, however, could have multiple wives.
In this home video that he would later send to federal agents during the siege,
No.
Koresh linked his blend of spirituality and sex
The rumor's true.
with the purity of the Garden of Eden.
He was showing it in the Bible. This passage would say we were just loaned to each other.
Some beautiful custom work.
Koresh had sex with underage girls.
Whoa.
And with his various wives, he fathered at least 13 children.
So you should be having another one here in about a month, huh?
It wasn't so much this is a man who's doing something that we don't approve of.
This is my little one, Holly.
As much as he was teaching us greater things.
He's my love baby, right? Huh? Is my great, wonderful looks something that just women can't resist?
Really?
You know, I saw a lot of people around me having babies, and I mean, I knew that meant my time was coming.
Kathy Jones's husband, David, was okay with it.
Fucking
Kathy
cuck.
was not, and she left.
If I had stayed there, I would have had children by David Koresh. That's when I really, really got scared.
God's in control.
Over time, Koresh attracted a diverse group from as far away as Australia, England, Jamaica, the Philippines, about 130 in all.
Trust God, read your Bible, know what you're talking about. What are you doing with your life? What do you do every day with your life? Is it something God approves of?
The Branch Davidians supported themselves in part by buying
Those
guns
look pretty
to
legal.
sell at gun shows.
It's not against law to buy a firearm. It's not against law to buy anything that they sell at a gun show.
But by 1993, the federal government believed Koresh was illegally converting
Believed.
rifles into machine guns.
Believed.
Armed with arrest
Because that totally means, you know, it's 100%, right? I mean, it's kind of like they believe he had weapons, or, you know, they believe that he had a deportation order, and, well, wait, that doesn't have any...
and search warrants, 76 agents piled into 2 cattle trailers for a surprise raid. It would be the largest armed assault in the history of American law enforcement.
Yeah, that guy's pretty smart. Hey, they're shooting holes in the wall from the inside. Let me stick my face in the window.
Now what's your emergency?
February 28, 1993.
This Lynch. Hello?
This is how the war in Waco began.
Yeah, this is Lieutenant Lynch. May I help you? Yeah, there's 75 men around our building and they're shooting at us.
The caller was Wayne Martin, Sheila Martin's husband.
Our children were down on the floor, but we had been standing up. We would have been hit.
Tell them there are children and women in here and to call it off. All right. Hello? I hear gunfire. Oh, shit.
It was a raid by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
Hello? Call it off. Who is this?
ATF agents trying to arrest David Koresh and search the Branch Davidian compound.
The operation that winter morning was the culmination of an 8-month investigation. The feds believe Koresh was illegally converting semi-automatic AR-15s like this one
That's
into
an
the
M16.
fully automatic machine guns soldiers use.
All you gotta do is change out the trigger.
Federal agents had rented a house across the street posing as college students trying to buddy up to Koresh. But he never bought the act.
We knew we were being watched from across the road. We knew there were some kind of government agents over there.
ATF planned a military-style raid, what they called dynamic entry. It hinged on the element of surprise. Hide 76 agents in innocuous-looking cattle trailers and strike while the Davidian men were outside, away from their guns.
We practiced for it. They drilled over and over again.
The pressure for federal agents to act rose when the local newspaper published an expose about Koresh's multiple wives and sex with underage girls. With this sidebar, the law watches, but has done little.
And so, as ATF is preparing, the media is finding out and trying to make its own preparations in order to cover the raid.
On that Sunday morning, a local TV station sends a photographer out to the Branch Davidian compound to stake it out.
Uh-oh.
He gets to this road about a mile away and realizes he's lost.
The cameraman sees a mail carrier, explains who he is, and asks directions.
The mailman, very friendly, told the guy how he could find the property, and then turned around and went to go ask to talk to David Koresh.
The mailman is Branch Davidian David Jones.
Oops.
And when Jones speaks to David Koresh, one of the ATF college students is right there.
David and them told him, "We know who you are and what's fixing to happen. May God bless you," in effect.
The ATF agent races to the undercover house across the street, warns commanders the element of surprise was lost.
He told them, please don't do this. He told them, they know we're coming, call it off, begged them to call it off.
But instead of calling it off, the ATF commanders load up and rush in.
They didn't want their pride hurt.
In the direction of my wives and my kids, damn it, I'll meet you at the door any time.
Each side blames the other for firing first.
I hear the shots. I go, oh my God, there's going to be a bloodbath.
Top federal officials would later call the decision tragically wrong.
Let's settle this now before anybody gets hurt. Is anybody hurt in there, Wayne? Oh no, man screaming! What? A man is screaming! Wayne! I'm under fire!
What's up, Carmen? Same to you.
In the middle of the gun battle, David Koresh also calls 911.
Yeah, this Lynch. Hey, Lynch? Yeah. That's kind of a funny name there.
Huh.
No, look. Now, who am I speaking with? This is David Koresh. Okay, David. The notorious.
Koresh, calm, wants to talk scripture.
Now, there's some things in that Bible that have been held as mysteries. Yes, sir. About Christ. Yes, sir. Now, when it says in Revelation 22, behold, I come quickly, my reward is with me, the statement is, what reward did Christ receive in heaven from his Father? He received a book with 7 seals. Can I interrupt you for a minute? Sure. All right. We can talk theology, but right now... This is life. This is life and death. The theology we're doing is life and death. Yes, sir.
Finally, after 90 minutes, a ceasefire.
I kept hearing that, and I kept saying, oh, good, this is over, it's over.
Inside, Koresh and others have been wounded.
Want to see one of the holes here? Here's one of them.
6 Branch Davidians are dead.
That's cute.
Outside,
I mean, not the
ATF
dead people.
looks like an army in retreat. More than 20 agents wounded. 4 agents are dead. When you realize that not only were they shooting at you, but now you had dead federal law enforcement officers outside.
It's a whole different ballgame from that point on. We're looking to God to indicate how we play this.
The war in Waco has just begun.
Crazy how they had almost an entire fucking army out there for 70-something people, 130. And a good majority of them women and children. Yeah, that's totally a threat.
When ATF agents raided the Branch Davidian compound in February 1993, everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
It's poor planning.
Law enforcement had never dealt with anything like this before. As many bad guys as they take down, they'd never been faced with this kind of firepower and people willing to use this kind of firepower.
With 4 federal agents dead,
Get that camera out of here! Get out of here!
emotions are running high.
Many of the agents that are wounded want to go back in there and say, let's do it, let's get this thing over with.
Cooler heads prevail. Authorities seal off the area.
Right.
And ATF begins negotiating with Koresh, the overriding concern to get the children out of the compound.
That everything's okay, just you and me are talking, and that's the main thing. Because you care for people, and you're sincere and honest.
The feds are worried about another Jonestown, where more than 900 members of a religious cult died in a suicide pact in 1978 with cyanide-laced Kool-Aid.
Terrible Kool-Aid. They should have added more
Serious
sugar.
concern when Koresh quotes the book of Revelation with its prophecy of violence in the final days.
Here we are at the day of the Lord. All the prophets talk about the great and dreadful day of the Lord, when God will make inquisition for blood. That's not today, David. Oh, it is.
Trying to find common ground, the agent
MREs.
talks about the Davidians' huge stockpile of meals ready to eat, MREs.
What's your favorite one? I ate one of those yesterday.
Chili Mac.
These two. I like the applesauce there. Oh, yeah. That's not bad, Maple nut cakes. Yeah.
Surreal, considering the bloodshed. But some children are being sent out, including Sheila Martin's 3 youngest.
I said, life is never going to be the same. This whole situation had changed our whole life.
Meanwhile, in the wake of the ATF debacle, the U.S. Justice Department sends in the FBI.
Oh, that's going to make it better, right?
A heavily armed tactical unit with armored personnel carriers and negotiators armed with a phone and their wits.
I teach negotiators that the very first thing you have to have is self-control.
Gary Nessner is the Bureau's chief negotiator.
When you got there, when you were briefed, what were you dealing with?
Well, I think in context ATF, where there clearly was anger, the predominant emotion I was seeing or behavior was devastation. Almost like walking zombies.
It's called shell shock.
Nessner's team wants to understand Koresh's personality.
And it's just something that this whole nation's going to have to learn. Whether they're going to learn by being sober and listening.
Bro,
or they're
looking at this guy's picture, or this video right here, I think Eric Bana should have played him in a movie and not fucking Randy Quaid. But then again, that Randy Quaid movie was probably old.
You're going to learn the hard way.
Never mind. I totally forgot. Whoever they had him in the fucking miniseries. Randy Quaid was fucking the other one. Oh my God, my brain's not working this morning.
Everything he did almost throughout the entirety of the ordeal was ambivalence, was part of me wants to live, part of me wants to die.
They look for clues in this TV news report about Koresh and Branch Davidians from Australia.
His tongue is the pin of a... So how's God going to talk to me in the latter days?
At least they couldn't pull the racism on this one.
So there'll be no excuses.
They were sending agents literally all over the world trying to scramble and find out anything they could, any former Davidian, anybody who knew anything about these people.
Within days, FBI profilers will send this report up the chain of command. Koresh has characteristics associated with psychopaths. His followers have low self-esteem, are unable to act or think for themselves, and are easily manipulated.
What does that tell you about the FBI?
They have a low estimation of us.
Sincere in their beliefs, the Davidians are looking to God for guidance.
Tell me, how is God telling you what to do? God says pack a lunch.
We look to
God says
David
come out.
for God to
says
tell
don't
us.
come out.
David was the medium through which God spoke to us.
So you listened to David, believing David was receiving his messages from God.
Correct.
And David was initially telling
If you didn't think God was talking to him, you wouldn't have been there.
Oh, well.
By
So
the
that
end of
doesn't mean you're
day
crazy?
2, negotiators have a breakthrough. Koresh promises to lead his disciples out if the feds put his Bible lecture on the radio nationwide.
I, David Koresh, agree upon the broadcasting of this tape to come out peacefully with all the people.
Clive Doyle thinks life for him and his 18-year-old daughter,
cute puppy.
Sherry, will soon return to normal.
When they're talking about us coming out, I go pack a lunch. Tell my daughter we're going to go out. We sit on the grass while they search the building. I'm still thinking of search warrant. I don't know how long it'll take. We might get hungry. We'll sit out there. When it's through, we'll come back home.
What we're trying to present today,
At 1:30 p.m., the sermon airs.
we see that God has a book.
1 hour on the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And remember, the most fearful warning ever given to man in Scripture is the warning found in Revelation 22.
But after the broadcast, the surrender plan changes. Koresh says he's gotten a message.
You know, when you confer with God, you can't turn away from Him.
God says to wait.
I'm guessing waiting was a bad idea.
We want to resolve this as much or more so than you do.
After promising federal negotiators that he would lead his followers out, David Koresh says God told him,
Just kidding.
My God told me to wait, and that's all I'm doing.
Koresh
Your God,
also
by the
has
way.
an earthly concern, being raped in prison if he surrenders.
Hopefully, if I'm notorious, they won't put me with no bubbas, huh? You know, there's a lot of bubbas that they
Well, you
they
molested
want to molest
kids.
you if they think you molest children.
Feeling duped, the FBI commander orders the armored personnel carriers closer to
Whoa,
the
why are they
building
sending
to
those in?
tighten the noose. But it only seems to
Well, thank you, Jennifer.
antagonize Koresh.
Your organization in this United States of America is a liar. You're
Oh.
saying peace with your mouth, but your words are words of a dragon.
As a negotiator, I would have preferred to go back to Koresh again and again, trying to get him to live up to what he had promised to do,
But
rather than taking an action that only gave him ammunition to be more angry at us.
The negotiators are now fighting on two fronts, trying to calm David Koresh
You're just smoothing me and trying to use psychology on me.
Yep.
and trying to talk their own bosses out of overreacting.
There was no need for those vehicles.
Sometimes there's this compelling thing we call action imperative, where authorities feel they have to do something to be seen as decisive and in charge. And when you're compelled to do that, you often end up doing the wrong thing.
Koresh isn't making it easy. He claims to have weapons that can penetrate the armored personnel carriers, which he calls little buggies.
Direct
He
energy?
threatens to blow
Just
the
kidding.
government's little buggies to pieces.
That's when the decision was made by the tactical guys. Let's go get us a really big tank. They got in an M1 Abrams tank.
The military armor is supposed to protect the tactical guys who are up close. Even with the big guns removed, it's a show of strength to intimidate the Branch Davidians. Instead, it strengthens the Davidians' faith and intensifies their distrust.
What's up, dude?
This guy who is directing David,
Ophelia Santoya.
I believe it.
The Filipino?
What's going to happen in the next few days?
I don't care.
Whoa!
What do you believe is going to happen?
What? You guys are gonna kill us?
Oh.
Koresh himself looks to the Old Testament prophet Nahum, who says God's enemies will come in chariots with flaming torches. To Koresh, the FBI is fulfilling a prophecy.
Kind of looks like it.
Chariots with flaming torches that make noise like thunder. You know, we know what that really is, don't we?
Yep.
Tanks.
That's not really a...
Despite
There
the
you go. That's an
incredibly
offensive
heavy
weapon.
armor, the negotiators settle into a routine with Koresh.
David, where are you again now?
We're here at chapters 26 of
What about the music?
Okay, hold on for just a minute here. Let me catch up with you a little bit. 26:9.
There seems to be a rapport, and Koresh praises his favorite negotiators for their friendly tone.
Now, the reason why we've talked to Henry is because Henry, like yourself, you know, knows how to be a waitress. And that's what you people are. You're professional waitresses.
Wow.
You know, professional waitresses that are really good get tipped good.
The tip is the release of children. 21 kids in the first 6
Get out of the
days.
kid's face. Fuck.
When these beautiful little kids came
It's
in
crazy.
the negotiation room,
Because they keep letting kids out. They just said 21 right there.
and sat on our laps, it was a constant reminder to all of us of what was at stake here.
The negotiators are based at this airfield, 13 miles away. As children arrive, they put them on the phone with their parents.
Are you okay? Yeah.
Floresita Sonobi talking to Mark, one of the children.
They didn't treat you good, bad? No, they treated me good. What did they do to you? They put me in that tank and took me down on the road further down.
Oh, tank.
Put me in a van and brought me here.
Parents are parents the world over. And while they had an extraordinary allegiance to David Koresh, we certainly wanted to tug at those parental heartstrings.
Hey, Mark. Huh? I love you. You be good boy, okay? Okay. And if you see some of the kids, tell them I love them. Okay.
Mark also talks to Koresh's oldest son, Cyrus.
I'm at the airport. There's lots of planes out front. You see any taking off? No. There's someone in a tank. Were you kind of nervous? No. It was bumpy. That was the only thing. Come on out when you can, if you can. I think I can.
Well, there was plenty of doubt, but I was pleased with the progress of our strategy. I mean, over those first several days, we had, I don't know, a dozen or so children come out. And any way you look at that, that's a positive indicator.
But many Davidians will not budge, including Clive Doyle.
Did you ever consider leaving?
Why should I? I haven't committed a crime, and this is where I live. Why do I need to come out?
Okay.
Hey, David.
Sir.
Are you a patient person?
Yeah, I'm really
Obviously. 51
You're gonna
days
see
later.
Patience, because the only thing that we're going to do is sit and wait.
Despite the negotiators' promise, their counterparts, the tactical team with tanks, is losing patience. The war in Waco is about to escalate.
Pretty sure that was the National Guard.
You guys, you do it your way, I do it my way.
negotiators want to speak with you.
After 6 days, the flow of children out of the Branch Davidian compound stops.
Most of the kids, all but a half dozen, who stayed inside were the biological children of David Koresh.
These children that
You know, like where they blocked the entrance as they were getting gassed out and burned? Oh, yeah. Forgot about that.
have are for a reason.
They were to grow up and be part of the jury that would judge the world in the end times. And so these were like sainted kids.
You want to go out? You want to leave? How come? Because why? You want to stay with me?
The standoff is at a turning point. Nearly 100 Branch Davidians remain inside, including 24 children. And the FBI is divided over what to do.
No, they weren't.
The negotiators wanted to continue talking, and the tactical people wanted to get it over with.
There was great tension and a big desire to get those people out of there. The question was, how are you going to do
Who
that
made the
without
call?
further loss of life?
Siding with the tactical team, the FBI commander turns up the pressure, cutting electricity to the compound, blasting it with floodlights, and cranking up the loudspeakers.
No, you could have picked a
bombarded
different
the
song.
house with the sounds of dying rabbits,
Tibetan monk chants, Buddhist chants.
the sound of a telephone being off the hook.
The
Right, that
FBI
might do
also
it.
plays a Nancy Sinatra song.
One of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you.
A song with an implied threat.
Those kinds of actions that agitate are counterproductive to relationship building. We know that. We knew that then. We know it now.
It was emotionally driven.
It was emotionally driven. It was driven out of frustration.
They were not driving a wedge between us and David. What they were doing was creating attitudes between us and them.
Hardening your position.
A lot of times, yeah.
If anything, the FBI's get tough approach seems to confirm Koresh's apocalyptic
Sam?
message.
I know
Same to you,
we're
brother.
in the last days.
I look around and I can see, well, if this is not the end of time, I don't know when.
Koresh's disciples taped this message for their families.
Remember that I taught you that prophecy has to be fulfilled, and the time has come.
I'm serving a true and living God that sits on the throne, and if you do so, you can't die.
Oh.
They believed they were on something like Noah's Ark. Now, if you're on Noah's Ark, you ain't leaving the boat.
Well, once it lands, yeah.
3 weeks into the standoff, 12 more adults have come out, including Sheila Martin. But she leaves behind her husband and her 4 oldest children.
They believed in God for themselves. They used to tell me that no matter what the situation, if I chose to leave, they wanted to stay.
The war in Waco is now a stalemate.
It was costing hundreds of thousands of dollars a day. There were hundreds of FBI personnel.
I mean, this was a national...
International.
International embarrassing TV show that was going on too long.
It was. It was. You know, and the FBI is a
At
proud
least involving our
organization.
federal agents.
The FBI, I think, felt uncomfortable now being in a situation which was being driven by perhaps a madman and feeling powerless and vulnerable.
As negotiators talk, the tactical team is moving in again, bulldozing vehicles in front of the compound, destroying them.
If you're a David Koresh, are you going to believe what the nice negotiator's telling you, or are you going to look out your window and be more influenced by more aggressive actions that you may feel threaten you?
I mean, your work was being undercut, plain and simple.
Clearly it was, and that was beyond frustrating.
Frustrating and frightening to those inside the compound, like Clive Doyle's daughter, Sherry.
Hope they didn't shoot the
She made
dog.
a statement to me. She said if they attacked and she got mangled or shot and was in a bad way, she said, don't let me suffer. And all I said to her, don't worry about it, Sherry. I says, it's all going to work out. You know, God's in control.
On day 46, the standoff takes what could be a major turn. Koresh says he wants time to write down his final message on the book of Revelation. And if he gets it,
Manifesto.
he promises to lead everyone out.
I can go on paper here and said that David Koresh told me that as soon as he finishes this manuscript,
I'll be splitting out of this place. I'm so sick of MREs.
Sick of MREs.
I don't blame
and
you.
no longer worried about getting raped in prison.
can I say that I think that's one of your big concerns is Mr. Bubba.
I'm not worried about Bubba.
People were packing bags. People were all excited. It's over. All of this situation is about to come to an end.
David, frankly, I'm eagerly awaiting this manuscript.
Well, I tell you what, it's going to blow your socks off.
But the FBI doubts his intentions.
The FBI
Has a
heard blow.
plan to force him out. Koresh sees the heavy armor clearing a path out front.
You're doing wrong before God, before man. You are doing wrong.
His response is prophetic.
All I can say is that if you want to place this in the history books as one of the saddest days in the world, you're fixing to step across the ribbon.
Within hours, David Koresh and most of his disciples will die.
There's your trigger warning.
It's time for you to exit the compound in an orderly fashion.
April 19th, 1993, just before dawn.
April 19th, huh?
FBI's loudspeakers.
David, individuals inside the Branch Davidian compound. We are in the process of placing tear gas into the building.
The feds are out of patience and ready to make arrests for the murder of the 4 ATF agents 51
Yes, he was
days
the cult
earlier.
leader, but they originally lied about the weapons, automatic weapons, to start all this.
The tear gas is inserted from booms on specially modified tanks and fired from grenade-like canisters.
You are under arrest. This standoff is over.
When the Davidians shoot at the tanks, the FBI intensifies the gas.
Believe me, it will not get any better. It will only get worse.
Yeah,
After
that's
2
true.
hours, the FBI begins ripping holes in the building. Exit routes, they say.
And you go, if we step out of this hole, they're going to shoot us? Are they so angry because ATF agents are dead or because we've made them wait so long?
David, you have had your 15 minutes of fame. It's time to leave the building.
51 days.
An hour later, there's smoke and fire.
We can work through this. Don't lose control of this, David. Don't lose control of this.
Dude, y'all lost control.
Flying above the complex, an infrared camera records the fire as a bright plume.
David, don't do this to your people.
Within minutes, there's a second fire. Then a third.
This is not the way to end this. Lead your people out, David. Be a messiah, not a destroyer.
Huh. Who's the destroyer there, buddy?
After 45 minutes, the building is engulfed. Only 9 people
Why were there
make it
3
out.
different spots where it started?
I
Interesting.
came out, basically driven out by the fire.
Sheila Martin, who had come out 3 weeks earlier, is watching the drama on television, terrified for her husband and her 4 oldest children.
You're thinking if they were in the hallway alone, were they running? Did the fire catch them? It's just very horrible to think.
Fanned by 25-mile-an-hour winds, this is Doomsday. Critics blame the fire on the FBI's tear gas, but an independent special counsel ultimately found David Koresh ordered the fire set.
That's not true. Yes, it was a combination of tear gas, but like I said, one part they had where the vehicle, the 88 was the tank, and the fire started there. But on the other side of the compound, how did two tiny fires start over there? And then it just went inwards.
With accelerants.
I blame David Koresh, but because I believe he's to blame does not mean we, the FBI, did everything right or we did not make mistakes, because certainly we did.
You believe patience would have provided many more survivors?
No question in my mind. I believe that a successful negotiation is not necessarily getting everyone out alive. It's getting everyone out alive that we can, in my judgment. We did not get out all the people, potentially all of them.
No shit.
We could have. And for me, that's a failure.
Autopsies found Sheila Martin's family died from smoke and fire.
You still cry?
Yes. I think the middle of the night is the worst. When you wake up and you think about things and you see a picture and see their smile. You can't remember the way they sounded. You can't remember their voices.
At least 20 deaths were from gunshots. They were suicides and mercy killings. Among them, David Koresh and Sherry Doyle.
And I believe that because of her either giving her life or having it taken from her violently like that, I believe that she is going to be saved.
In all, 76 Branch Davidians died that day, including 24 children. That night, Attorney General Janet Reno
that cunt.
approved the FBI raid, said it was intended to prevent the children inside from being harmed by David Koresh.
At the time, we made the best decision I think that we could, based on everything that we knew. Based on what we know now, it was obviously wrong.
It's weird that the government always has situations like, oh, we tried and we're so sorry that all this stuff happened. Oh, well, we need sympathy and support. No, you guys have all the fucking information, but there's certain things that you want to try to get rid of.
There were aftershocks. To extremists like Timothy McVeigh, Waco was a call to arms. He would bomb the federal building in Oklahoma City exactly 2 years later, killing 168 people.
His feeling was, this is a war between the people and the government. The government won at Waco, but we won bigger at Oklahoma City.
Remarkably, neither Clive Doyle nor Sheila Martin blamed the FBI.
That's
For
crazy.
them, the fire, the deaths, their grief, it was all part of a bigger plan by a much bigger power.
God permitted it to work out the way it did. He didn't stop it.
We don't want to feel that something horrible is something good, but that was what we were supposed to have, that faith that if something happens, you trip, you fall, you trust God has a reason for it.
I guess, Sheila, is the fact that something horrible did happen and I'm not seeing the good.
The Bible says that all things work together for good.
That's crazy.
Love the Lord.
Today, there is a new chapel on the 77 acres and a new spiritual leader.
9/11's inside job.
Pace, the man who challenged David Koresh in 1984, says God chose him to take charge.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's what I believe.
Are you the prophet? Are you a prophet?
I believe that
The new Messiah.
I'm enlightened. Let me put it that way.
With a few followers, Pace is clearing debris, getting ready for what he believes will be the gathering of the faithful.
Tom, do you think it's too windy?
It will come at the end of time, he says.
Oh, that's smart.
Foreshadowed by the collapse of major governments around the world. Perhaps soon.
These English-speaking Protestant nations are going to be swallowed up by the one world government.
Uh-oh.
And it's all going to be central bank.
Uh-oh.
You understand what I'm saying? They're all going to be swallowed up by the one world order.
And what will be here when that happens?
God's kingdom.
Huh?
Clive Jones and Sheila Martin don't buy it. Not Pace's vision.
1, 2, 3, 4.
They believe that David Koresh, not Charles Pace, will lead the world through the final days.
He's
I
dead.
feel even stronger as a result of what has happened.
Faithfully, patiently, they are waiting for the resurrection.
What the fuck?
David Koresh, Messiah.
What can I say? You just they call me a rambling man, don't they? Anyway, God bless, and we'll sign off.
Wait a minute. So they're literally just still wait. Koresh will come back. David will come back, and then he will lead us. He will lead us into salvation. Bro, yeah. And I believe by the New World Order, he was referring to Zionists.
I know where I came from. I come from God. I didn't come from monkey.
What?
I came from God through Adam through a long lineage of man. Did Jesus look like the Son of God? No one thought so, except a few people in his day.
Like me?
David Koresh was a spiritual leader who saw himself as the final prophet in a world that was coming to an end. Though Koresh and his followers were largely peaceful, they were amassing weapons as a way to defend themselves when the apocalypse came. Numbering about 100, the Branch Davidians lived a quiet existence in a compound known as Mount Carmel, located just outside of Waco, Texas. Then, in 1993, the federal government obtained a warrant to raid their headquarters on the grounds that they possessed illegal weapons.
So Texas, we have been watching as they have sent vehicles in to ram holes in...
When they showed up on February 28th of that year, federal agents with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives thought they would be in and out.
Jesus
The main
Christ.
problem we had, I don't believe, is that we were outmaneuvered or outplanned. The problem we had is that we were outgunned.
But the Branch Davidians resisted.
50 ATF agents had come here armed with search and arrest warrants. They were greeted with lots of gunfire.
4 ATF agents and 6 Branch Davidians were killed during the initial raid. And after a 51-day standoff, the siege ended with the burning of Mount Carmel. 76 Branch Davidians, including 25 children, perished after being trapped inside. Waco was the largest gunfight on American soil since the Civil War, and many people point to it as a pivotal moment in American history that created new levels of distrust in the federal government.
They were amassing enough armaments to outfit a small army.
The ultimate goal was to arrest David Koresh and to seize all of the illegal weapons.
Almost every preconceived notion I had about Waco changed by the end of it.
Tiller Russell is the director of Waco, American Apocalypse, a new docuseries on Netflix which brings to light never-before-seen footage of the government's siege of Mount Carmel.
It's easy to look at this story and sort of say, okay, here's the, jackbooted thugs of the government coming in and taking away people's right. Or you can, read it contrarily from a radically different perspective.
What's up with his fucking
but what
hair?
I felt hadn't been done was just taking all of these individuals who lived through this incredible moment.
This dude is like, oh man, I'm getting gray hair. Can you just give me the blue, but fade it? Make it look like it's actually gray blue, so I can match my shirt and my little fucking soul patch
of American history, and treating them like people, and just allowing the audience to engage with them as human beings and to draw their own conclusions from it.
911, what's your emergency? 75 men around our building and they're shooting at us at Mount Carmel. Tell them there are children and women in here to call it off.
What captivated me and hooked me was my producers had unearthed this amazing archival footage, which had been shot inside the FBI's hostage negotiation room. And it really showed the day-to-day kind of like mechanics of hostage negotiation, which I don't think the world has ever actually seen. The FBI had shot it initially thinking we're going to, blow into town. This will be over in 24 hours. We'll get everybody out. And then it became this, epic
standoff.
story that ended up stretching on for 51 days. And so the footage was shelved and the world had never seen it. There's also all of the recordings that the FBI made of the individual calls. They'd planted bugs inside the compound. There were recordings of that.
You described the series as like an exploration of what leads people to the brink of the apocalypse and what happens when they've arrived. Could you kind of expand on that? What did you mean by that?
In this like small town on the outskirts of Waco, Texas, you have this vast and diverse array of people who show up and they feel that they're in the hands of a latter-day prophet, somebody who is able to take every single book in the Bible and see this sort of master vision for the end of the world and a future new world. And he's so convincing and so charismatic as a speaker that he's enabled to kind of enrapture and capture the imaginations and attention of all these people. And it's a very diverse group of folks, right? Some of the folks who are there, they literally grew up there, their entire lives had been spent there, and some had come from all the way
I
around
know
the
what it is,
world, from
guys.
Australia. Some had
So what
masters
had happened was this guy was at a concert, right? At the concert, he has like, fuck, I gotta go use the porta potty. So he went to the porta potty, and I guess he forgot to lock the door. And these three guys in hoods, white hoods, picked him up, turned him upside down, and put his head in the blue water in the porta potties. And that kind of permanently stained his hair. And I feel bad for the guy, but I don't at the same time.
degrees. Some had come from different religions. And so you have this like fantastically powerful orator who's painting this vision of the end of the world. That vision is so strong that it literally engulfs, the press, it engulfs the FBI, and it ends up being manifested in the end. Years before there was a shootout, before there was a standoff, David Koresh had been preaching, the end of the world is coming. Tanks are going to roll up on our doorstep. We're literally going to be facing the apocalypse, and we are the chosen ones that'll, lead on to the new life.
There's some terrible ass
And
pictures. Well, I mean, they're cool pictures, but at the same time,
he conjured that he literally manifested that in the world. You're talking about, Abrams tanks and Bradley armored personnel carrier arrayed around this compound in a cow field in Texas.
There definitely wasn't a Bradley.
Truly astonishing historical moment.
I mean,
how did you
Abrams.
kind of wrestle with, like, there are so many facts from this 51-day siege that are still being disputed, like who shot first, who started the fire, what happened to the door.
Who cares who shot first? They were on their property.
Even now still matters.
I think that the truth always matters, but there's this poet, Simon Ortiz, who once said, "There is no truth, there is only story." And I think that there's something really powerful about that, in the sense of everyone does conjure their own, version of what happens, and no two people's memories ever aligns exactly. There are these fundamental questions. Okay, who shot first, and how did this, gunfight break out? And you interview people, and immediately, they give you completely opposing versions of it. And I think there is this sort of symptom of the fog of war, right? And then the same set of questions.
Isn't that right,
exists,
Sam?
At the end of
So
the story,
right.
Okay, here's this massive fire and conflagration and loss of life and all these, people and children, and it's all happening in real time on national television. And every person only holds a piece of the story. They only know what they saw, what they remember, what their history tells them, and then it kind of gets cemented in memory. But at the same time, I didn't live it. I wasn't there. It's all based on reconstructing it to the best of my ability with the full cooperation and participation of the people there.
David Thibodeau
Whoa.
is one of the 9 Branch Davidians who survived after escaping the fire.
I remember
at Mount
Thibodeau's
Carmel.
name.
Reason interviewed Thibodeau back in 1999. At the time of the interview, he believed that Koresh had been unfairly demonized by the media. What role did the media play in Waco, and do you agree or disagree that Koresh might have been demonized somewhat by the media?
Well, the media played an absolutely fascinating role in Waco, and I think like at the center of Waco is this massive failure of communication. It's the failure of the FBI to communicate internally within itself. It's the failure of the FBI to understand what the Branch Davidians want and what would motivate them. It's the inability of the Branch Davidians themselves to communicate with the outside world. And so the press ends up being, caught between the folks inside the compound, the FBI, and the rest of the world understanding the story.
Koresh showed himself pretty quickly. They immediately wanted media.
Everybody wants to find an angle and put a simple, lens and define him as this. And I think my assessment is that he was many things.
A Choma.
And I think when you try to reduce it to just one thing, I think that he did, in fact, probably feel himself to be a prophet. I think
Didn't like David Koresh, but however, this whole situation was just a shit show. And I feel like this could all happen again.
I think he also was having sex with underage kids. And I think he was a powerful orator and speaker. And I think he also was, somebody who was lying and changing his mind and manipulating. Everybody's just trying to build their own portrait of who this guy is and how he brought us to the doorstep of the apocalypse.
If your business is to go into a building at 4 o'clock in the morning and kill the bad guys and save the good guys and risk your life in doing it,
right,
that's a different mindset than somebody who's going to sit in a room and try to talk a bad guy out.
In the years since Waco, we have discovered many missteps taken by both the negotiation team and the hostage rescue team and kind of miscommunications that were going on between them. Can you describe the dynamics at play and why these two groups, had such a hard time kind of working together to resolve the situation?
We tend to think of the FBI as this monolithic entity, right? Which is, and this sort of great institution. But really, at the end of the day, the FBI is composed of individual FBI agents. And in this case, there was this very profound conflict between the hostage rescue team, which is the door kickers, the shooters, the snipers, and then on the other hand, the negotiators, the crisis negotiation unit. And their sort of jobs are the same. The job is, in a crisis where you have hostages, to get everybody out as safely as possible. But they're two radically different approaches. Waco, it's hard for us to remember, but nothing like this had ever happened before. So everybody was into this completely new scenario in terms of scale, intensity, and duration. And of course there were failures and mistakes that were made. Many of the things that are roiling our culture still today, the seeds of which were kind of planted at Waco, which is like distrust to the federal government, conflicting viewpoints about, does God belong in our society and not, the right to bear arms. And so there are all these fundamental issues, which are, God and guns and children in America. They've been with us since the founding of this country. They'll be with us, through the end. But Waco was a particularly volatile and explosive example of when things go horribly wrong, what that powder keg can be like. The bombing of the Murrah building in Oklahoma City 2 years later by Timothy McVeigh is a direct, one-to-one result of what happened in Waco. There's, what happened, the school shooting in Columbine, people subsequently being inspired by McVeigh and David Koresh and the, arguable missteps of the government. And, some people will draw a line all the way to January 6th in terms of, the distrust of government and sort of what you do when institutions fail and what are the rights and boundaries of citizens. And so I think the legacy of Waco is that we are now in sort of most incredibly politically divisive moment that certainly since the 1960s in America and maybe not since the founding of the country. And by looking at these stories where things went horribly wrong, my hope as a storyteller and as a filmmaker is we can revisit them and understand them with a greater amount of humanity so that those same mistakes don't reoccur in the future.
So they don't reoccur. Bro, it's gonna reoccur, I promise you. Totally gonna. We got a couple more on Waco. And then we're gonna do the last one on the Merrill building. Actually, Yeah, 2 more videos on this, and then we got the Oklahoma City bombing. Ruby Ridge was at the very beginning, Sam.
After a 51-day standoff with David Koresh's Branch Davidian cult, the FBI raided the cult's compound. By the time the smoke cleared, only fire-ravaged bodies, a few survivors, and countless questions about the way authorities handled the siege remained. The dramatic end of the Waco siege meant that David Koresh's Branch Davidians are now considered one of the most dangerous cults in recent history. However, the actual death toll of the siege remains unclear.
The FBI underestimated the charismatic control that David Koresh had over this faith community.
9 Branch Davidians escaped the fire, and the initial investigations turned up 72 bodies. However, Koresh stated before his death that there were a total of 95 people in the building. Whether he was inflating the numbers or not is uncertain. Assuming his count was correct, this means that 14 bodies were never...
What if? Did they ever show the bodies of the children? Like Lahaina?
Were found in the rubble, a possibility investigators accounted for by stating that the fire may have completely consumed some of the human remains.
Oh.
Minutes before setting out on the raid, the ATF learned from an undercover agent that Koresh knew they were coming.
It's also unclear whether some of the accounts of the dead include the 4 ATF agents who died in an earlier gunfight. Today, when an outlet gives an exact number of adults and children who died in the fire, it's most likely to say 75, but many reports still play it safe by keeping things vague. The way authorities handled the Waco situation drew a lot of criticism, although it was eventually concluded that the Branch Davidians themselves set the compound on fire.
Well, he'd been saying for such a long time that they were going to come for us. And then they did.
One line of investigation involved the FBI's copious use of CS gas, which is basically a tear gas, in an effort to flush the cultists out of the building. Some have theorized that the FBI's hours-long tear gas barrage may have hindered the Branch Davidians' ability to escape the compound once the fire started. This theory makes sense, as CS gas releases cyanide when exposed to fire.
The Davidians had gas masks, but of course the FBI knew that there are no gas masks for children.
Despite this, a medical examination of the Branch Davidians' remains found that CS gas played no part in their death.
Really?
Instead, many victims died from asphyxiation, gunshots, either self-inflicted or from fellow Branch Davidians, or blunt force.
Asphyxiation? So CS gas makes it to where you don't want to inhale because it fucking hurts.
Trauma caused by pieces of the crumbling building falling on them.
The tanks had done so much destruction, and there was just so much debris, you could not have gotten down the hallway.
While the FBI has been cleared of wrongdoing during the Waco siege,
if they're getting attacked and they're trying to get away, their heart rate's moving, their respiration is going to increase. Of course, it's going to make it harder to breathe.
their attempt to flush out the cultists with extreme amounts of tear gas had to have been a harrowing experience.
They issued the command over the radio to deploy the gas, and away we went.
Surviving Branch Davidian Clive Doyle testified in court saying, "I saw people in the chapel who had short sleeves on trying to rub it off. They were crying. It was like battery acid on your skin."
Yeah, if they're sweating especially.
Even before the siege ended, it was fairly clear that the Branch Davidian group was a pretty bad place for a child. Allegations of indoctrination and outright child abuse had been made against Koresh by authorities and survivors alike, and children who made it out of the compound before the fire had trouble adjusting to normal life.
Yeah.
He was hard on me.
I wouldn't recommend it. Like I said, I don't really get affected all that much. I get the little skin tingling, but I've seen people like, if you're sweating, it's going to burn. Not like fire, like a very annoying, like stinging, I don't know how to explain it, like getting a fucking tattoo times 10. And then when you try to inhale, your body's like, whoa, what the fuck is this? And your lungs are like, dude, stop. But then, you know, like I said, if you're breathing faster, your heart rate's increased, of course it's going to affect you a lot more than just staying calm.
Everything, down to the spankings, with a really big paddle.
However, the events of April 19, 1993 took things from bad to worse. Though the cult released many children during the siege, the bodies of 25 children were found in the aftermath of the fire. When autopsies were performed on 21 adult and adolescent Branch Davidians who died in the siege, authorities discovered that they'd all died violently, not from the fire.
You sure about that? Maybe on the civilian side, but we still use CS.
Instead, 20 victims had been shot to death by fellow cultists. The 21st body was that of a 3-year-old who'd been fatally stabbed. Cult leader David Koresh died during the events of April 19, 1993. His badly burned remains were found 3 days after the fire, but like many other Branch Davidians, the flames didn't kill him. Instead, an examination found a bullet wound in his forehead. The actual details of Koresh's death remain a mystery, but it's worth noting that he was unarmed at the time of his death. The FBI has put forward a theory that Koresh's right-hand man, Steve Schneider, shot him, possibly after catching Koresh trying to escape the burning compound, and coming to a conclusion that the leader he trusted was a fraud. Regardless of what actually happened, Schneider also died of gunshot wounds. His body and a rifle were found close to Koresh's remains. After the investigation, Koresh's body was released to his family, who buried him in an unmarked grave at Memorial Park Cemetery in Tyler, Texas.
Did they?
Only 4 people were present. According to the Los Angeles Times, however, some relatives suspected the body they were given might not actually have been Koresh at all. His mother, Bonnie Haldeman, said, I don't think I will ever rest in my heart. I didn't get to see the body, and I'm not even positive that is David there. Who knows? Apart from the Branch Davidians who died in the Waco siege, several government agents also perished. On February 28, 1993, ATF Special Agents Todd McKeon, Robert Williams, Conway LeBlue, and Stephen Willis died in the initial fierce gunfight between government agents and cult members. Another 28 agents were also injured during the siege.
The ATF did not understand that what the Davidians were going to see pulling up was the army of Babylon.
ATF held a joint memorial for the 4 fallen agents at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. on May 23, 1993, and there is a cenotaph stone at the ATF Mount Carmel Siege Memorial in Texas. As for the actual bodies, they're buried in different locations. McKeon's grave is at the Happy Valley Memorial Park in Carter County, Tennessee, and Williams is buried at Brandon Memorial Gardens in Rankin County, Mississippi. LeBlue was laid to rest in his native Lake Charles, Louisiana, and Willis's final resting place is in Houston, Texas. Some of the Branch Davidians who died in the siege were claimed and buried by their families. Notably, 24 of the cultists were from the UK, and at least some of them, such as Stephen and Philip Henry, received a proper burial and funeral service on home soil. Unfortunately, some of the bodies were burnt beyond recognition and couldn't be identified.
Right.
For example, the Henry's funeral also served as a memorial for their mother and 3 sisters, who also died at the compound.
We knew it was a cult. We would joke about it all the time, like, yep, we're cult members.
Around 30 of the bodies were unidentified or unclaimed. These bodies were kept in storage until late 1994, both because authorities considered using them as evidence and because some victims' lawyers wanted further tests to determine the cause of death. Ultimately, these victims were buried in paupers' graves not too far from where they died, at Restland Cemetery in Waco, Texas.
David's biggest failure was the fact that the kids were not released during the siege at some point. These kids never had a chance.
In recent years, surviving Branch Davidians and relatives of the dead have begun pushing for DNA testing and relocation of those remains. In 2021, 10 of the unidentified bodies, including some of Koresh's closest family members, were moved to nearby
knowing history and all, like I said before, I think those kids, I don't think kids died.
Rosamond Cemetery at the request of one prominent Branch Davidian's son. If you or someone you know may be the victim of child abuse, is dealing with spiritual abuse, is struggling, or in crisis, help is available. Contact the relevant resources below. The Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-4-8-CHILD.
Mr. Bain.
Now, let's tie it into another situation.
White supremacists like Bean saw in this standoff the same issues that they had decided were important with Randy Weaver. The Branch Davidians were not white supremacists, but now a broader section of the far right sees itself in Waco and says, we're being suppressed for our beliefs and our guns.
Up to the top of the hill, them 2 little white buildings up there.
There was a hill that was about 3 miles from Mount Carmel. It was on a rise that was high enough that you could just barely see Mount Carmel in the distance. This was as close as members of the public could get to the standoff.
You're next! You're next!
You're next.
Wake up and understand! You're next!
All
You talking
sorts
about
of
me?
folks that felt moved to come down to see what was going on at Waco.
What? Timothy McVeigh? That's weird.
Just arrived today.
I guess somebody told me a lot of people would be scared to put something on, like this.
Timothy McVeigh had already apparently been very concerned about what had happened at Ruby Ridge. So he came down to Waco and sold bumper stickers with pro-gun, anti-government slogans. He saw the raid as clear evidence of what the government would do to try to confiscate guns and persecute gun owners.
McVeigh, huh? And finally, just for this episode, we're going to go over this stream, a brief overview of Oklahoma City bombing. I don't think I've done a full video on this one yet. So I guess it's time. It's coming. Just don't know when yet. It's next.
The nation had only digested and come to terms with the horrific events at Ruby Ridge, Idaho, and the events at Waco, Texas, when the news broke about the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, on April 19, 1995, which was the second anniversary of the fiery end to the Waco siege. What led to the Oklahoma City bombing? Who was responsible?
Dude, I was in middle school.
What was the result of this event?
I think I was like 8th grade.
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, a veteran of the United States Army and Marine Corps, former history professor, book author.
Yeah,
welcome to this episode of Forgotten History.
The primary culprits were Timothy McVeigh, Michael Fortier, and Terry Nichols. They all met at Fort Benning, Georgia in 1988 and became friends. Both McVeigh and Nichols were radicalized by white supremacist and anti-government propaganda and were angry at the federal government's handling of the 1992 standoff with Randy Weaver and his family at Ruby Ridge, as well as the 51-day Waco siege the following year. In fact, McVeigh visited the Waco site during the standoff in March 1993 and again after the siege was over. These events prompted him to plan on bombing a federal building in response. McVeigh believed that federal agents were no better than communists or Nazis and believed that any of their locations were legitimate targets.
Allegedly.
Although he had considered assassinating several people, including Attorney General Janet Reno, FBI sniper Lon Horiuchi, famed at Ruby Ridge and Waco, and former Attorney General Bill Barr, among others.
Oh, that guy's name sounds familiar.
McVeigh decided to have a mass casualty event. The more dead bodies, the greater the message. McVeigh and Nichols decided that the chosen target should house at least 2 of the 3 federal law enforcement agencies involved in Ruby Ridge and Waco. Those agencies were the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Drug Enforcement Administration, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. In his own words, he, quote, regarded the presence of additional law enforcement agencies, such as the Secret Service or the U.S. Marshal Service, as a bonus. During December 1994, McVeigh and Fortier drove to Oklahoma City to inspect their primary target, the 9-story Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, named for a federal judge, which contained 14 federal agencies such as DEA, ATF, Social Security Administration, and recruiting offices for the Army and Marine Corps, and an employees' daycare center with small children and even infants. However, they had previously considered many targets in other locations in Missouri, Arizona, Texas, and Arkansas, but McVeigh chose the Murrah Building because he expected its glass front to shatter under the impact of the blast. According to McVeigh's own statements, he believed that the adjacent large open parking lot across the street might absorb and dissipate some of the force and protect the occupants of nearby non-federal buildings. He also thought that the open space around the building would provide better photo opportunities for propaganda purposes. In his own statement again, he planned the attack for April 19, 1995 to coincide with not only the second anniversary of the Waco siege, but also the Battle of Lexington and Concord. McVeigh and Nichols placed materials for the bomb in rented sheds. McVeigh obtained 9 binary explosive kinesticks from a gun collector named Roger E. Moore in August 1994. They then robbed Moore's home of $60,000 worth of guns, gold, silver, and jewels, and transported the property in Moore's stolen van.
Let me get that gold and silver, though.
Ironically, in the belief that his involvement would not be suspected, McVeigh wrote a letter to Moore claiming that government agents had burglarized him. Those stolen items from Moore were later found in Terry Nichols' home and in a storage shed that he had rented. McVeigh tested the early explosive with Nichols outside of Nichols' home in Harrington, Kansas. Satisfied that they were not totally incompetent, on September 30th, 1994, Nichols bought 40 50-pound bags of ammonium nitrate fertilizer from Mid-Kansas Co-op in McPherson, Kansas.
Yeah, no big deal.
Nichols later bought an additional 50-pound bag on October 18, 1994. McVeigh stated that he originally intended to use hydrazine rocket fuel, but it was far too expensive. In October 1994, McVeigh paid Michael and Lori Fortier a visit and showed them a diagram he had drawn of the bomb that he wanted to build, containing about 5,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate fertilizer mixed with 1,200 pounds of liquid nitromethane used in drag races and 350 pounds of Tobex packed in 1655 U.S. gallon drums. The bomb would have a combined weight of right around 7,000 pounds. McVeigh tried to buy the liquid fuel mixtures from several sources, and most of the vendors refused because of McVeigh's conflicting reasons for why he wanted the fuels, all except VP Racing Fuels representative Tim Chambers, who sold McVeigh 3 barrels. In McVeigh's rented storage unit, he stockpiled 7 crates of 18-inch long Tobex, 80 spools of shock tube, and 500 electric blasting caps, stolen from the Martin Marietta Aggregates Quarry in Marion, Kansas. He decided not to steal any of the 40,000 pounds of ANFO that was there because he did not believe it was powerful enough for his purposes, although he did eventually obtain 17 bags of ANFO from another source. McVeigh and Nichols set off another test bomb in the desert to avoid detection. On October 14, 1995, McVeigh paid for a room at the Dreamland Motel in Junction City, Kansas, and the next day,
I actually know where that is.
rented a 1993 Ford F700 Ryder truck under the name of Robert D. Kling. He used that alias because it belonged to an Army soldier he had served with named Kling and with whom he had shared physical characteristics. McVeigh, who had previously used aliases, had absent-mindedly signed in under his real name at the motel and used the address also on his forged license, which was also recorded later on the charge sheet at the Perry police station after his arrest. On April 16, 1995, McVeigh drove to Alabama City in a yellow 1977 Mercury Marquis, while Nichols drove his blue 1984 GMC pickup truck. They parked the Marquis a few blocks from the Murrah Federal Building and removed the car's license plate.
Stupid.
McVeigh then left a note on the dashboard covering the vehicle's identification plate number, the VIN, with a note that said, quote, "Not abandoned. Please do not tow. Will move by April 23. Needs battery and cable."
Oh.
Luckily for investigators, the nearby Regency Towers apartment building lobby security camera recorded images of the blue truck as both men took off in the truck and then returned to Kansas. During April 17th and 18th, 1995, McVeigh and Nichols loaded the bomb into the rental truck and then drove to Geary Lake State Park.
Oh.
Then they nailed wooden boards.
I was kind of a different kind of kid when this happened, and I think my slogan after this was, "Ryder, driving with us is a blast." Huh? Yeah, I was a morbid kid.
Onto the floor of the truck to hold the weight of the 13 barrels. Each barrel weighed nearly 500 pounds, and McVeigh packed even more explosives to the driver's side of the cargo bay, which he could set off. His backup plan, should all else fail, was to kill himself with his Glock 21 pistol in case the primary fuses failed in fact. During McVeigh's trial, Lori Fortier testified that McVeigh claimed to have arranged the barrels in order to form a shaped charge by tamping the aluminum side panel of the truck with bags of ammonium nitrate fertilizer to direct the blast laterally towards the building. McVeigh admitted that the barrels were placed in the shape of a backwards J for pure destructive power, and that he would have put the barrels on the side of the cargo bay closest to the Murrah building However, such an unevenly distributed load might have broken an axle, flipped the truck over, or at least caused it to lean to one side, which would have drawn attention. All or most of the barrels contained metal cylinders of acetylene intended to increase the fireball and the brilliance of the explosion. McVeigh drilled 2 holes in the cab of the truck under the seat, while 2 holes were also drilled into the body of the truck, where he added a fuel fuse ignition system, which was accessible from the front cab. 1 green cannon fuse was run through each hole into the cab as a time-delayed fuse run through plastic fish tank tubing conduit connected to 2 sets of non-electric blasting caps. These were to ignite the 350 pounds of Tobex Blastrite, a high-grade explosive, setting off the primary explosion, which would then set off the rest of the barrels. He painted the tubing yellow to blend in to the truck and duct taped them to the wall to make it harder to disable by pulling from the outside. All of the extra materials and tools were left in the truck to be destroyed. After finishing their work, Nichols returned home to Harrington and McVeigh drove to Junction City with the truck.
Sorry.
McVeigh's admitted that his original plan had been to detonate the bomb at 11 a.m., but at dawn on April 19, 1995, he decided to destroy the building at 0900 or 9 a.m. McVeigh drove into Oklahoma City at 8:50 a.m., and at 8:57, the Regency Towers apartment security camera that had previously recorded Nichols' pickup truck recorded the Ryder truck heading towards the Murrah building. It was at that time that McVeigh lit the 5-minute delayed action fuse. 3 minutes later, he lit the 2-minute fuse and parked the Ryder truck in a drop-off zone situated under the daycare center.
Well,
then he left and docked the truck.
5-minute fuse and there was traffic.
As he headed to get his getaway vehicle, he admitted that he had dropped the keys to the truck a few blocks away. At 9:02 a.m., the Ryder truck exploded in front of the north side of the building, creating a 30-foot wide and 8-foot deep crater on Northwest 5th Street next to the building, and the blast measured 3.0 on the Richter scale. The bombing killed 168 people. The victims ranged in age from 3 months to 73 years old, including 3 pregnant women, with another 680 people injured, and it destroyed more than 1/3 of the building, which had to be demolished. It also destroyed or damaged 324 other buildings within a 16-block radius. Glass was shattered in 258 buildings and 86 cars were destroyed. The damage caused an estimated $652 million worth of damage. McVeigh was arrested within 90 minutes near Perry in Noble County, Oklahoma, while driving the yellow Marquis north on Interstate 35. Oklahoma State Trooper Charlie Hanger stopped McVeigh for driving the car without a license plate and arrested him for having a concealed weapon. While being booked, McVeigh falsely claimed that he resided at Terry Nichols' brother, James Nichols' home address in Michigan. After booking McVeigh, Trooper Hanger searched his patrol car and found a business card from a Wisconsin military surplus store, which McVeigh had apparently dropped. Written on the back of the card was, quote, "TNT at $5 a stick, need more." That card was brought into evidence at McVeigh's trial. 10 days later, Terry Nichols was also arrested. Federal agents were able to link the VIN number on an axle of the truck to a specific Ryder rental agency in Junction City, Kansas. A sketch artist worked with Eldon Elliott, the owner of the agency. Lee McGowan of the Dreamland Motel also identified McVeigh as the man who parked a large yellow Ryder truck in the parking lot. McVeigh later acknowledged the casualty, saying, "I didn't define the rules of engagement in this conflict. The rules, if not written down, are defined by the aggressor. It was brutal, no holds barred. Women and kids were killed at Waco and Ruby Ridge. You put back in the government's faces exactly what they're giving out." He later stated, "I wanted the government to hurt like the people of Waco and Ruby Ridge had." McVeigh also stated, "You learn how to handle killing in the military. I faced the consequences, but you learn to accept
his first ID.
McVeigh ironically believed that the bomb attack had a positive impact on U.S. government policy, and he cited the peaceful resolution of the Montana Freemen standoff in 1996 the government's $3.1 million settlement with the Weaver family, and the April 2000 statements by President Bill Clinton regretting his decision to storm the Branch Davidian compound in Waco.
Wait, that was your decision?
McVeigh stated, "Once you bloody the bully's nose, and he knows he's going to be punched again, he's not coming back around." The official FBI investigation, classified as OK Bomb, involved 28,000 interviews, 3,200 kilograms of evidence, and nearly 1 billion pieces of forensic evidence. The evidence collected at McVeigh's home included the telephone number that led them to one of the farms where he bought the supplies for the bomb. McVeigh went on trial and was convicted in 1997. Timothy McVeigh was sentenced to death and executed by lethal injection on June 11, 2001, at the U.S. Federal Penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. Terry Nichols was sentenced to life in prison in 2004.
Bitch.
Michael and Lori Fortier testified against McVeigh and Nichols. Michael Fortier was sentenced to 12 years in prison for failing to warn the United States government. And his wife Lori, in a plea deal, received immunity from prosecution for testifying against all parties. On April 19, 2000, the Oklahoma City National Memorial was dedicated on the site of the Murrah Federal Building, commemorating the victims, and remembrances and services are held every year on April 19th at the time of the explosion.
Thank you for watching Forgotten History. Please click like, subscribe, and share. Send us comments.
Well. Yeah, I noticed the same thing, Sam. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's a brief history of how the government corruption can end up building a homegrown terrorist. Sad part is, Timothy McVeigh was a war veteran from the Desert Storm who around the same time started getting a strong distrust for the U.S. government. That's weird. That's real weird. That never happens. See, I didn't need the military to have my distrust. It just solidified it. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I hope y'all enjoyed this brief history of our country and our government overstepping its boundaries. Well, not really overstepping it, overreacting. And the propaganda that followed were all to make you think the government was right. But then you come down to the court cases, like in Randy Weaver's case, and congressional hearings, and then they realized, oh, man, we fucked up. I'm sorry. We'll give you $3.1 million for killing your son and your wife and the dog. No big deal. I hope you're okay with that. Or let's kill like 70-something people just because we got tired of waiting and we didn't want our ego to lose. But in reality, your ego caused deaths. Numerous deaths. And then we have the retaliation. Not saying I agree with everything that Timothy McVeigh did. I don't agree with any of it, except for his distrust for the government. But you don't go after innocent women and children. One of the main reasons I don't like Israel. You don't go after women and children. Whether you're government, whether you're a homegrown terrorist, whether you're a fucking country, whether you're Jeffrey Epstein, don't touch the women and children. That's how you get fucked up. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and children of all ages, I got nothing else for you today. I totally said I wasn't going to come on until Monday, but then I realized I had the morning free, so I decided to bring a little history. Because you guys know I like history. Granted, the fucking Waco one was only one-sided. Because I don't remember if that was Waco or Ruby Ridge that got me flagged last time. It was one of those two. Old channel, so I'm not really worried about it anymore. But anyway, I'm not telling y'all how to think, because that's just fucking ridiculous. That would make you just as smart as a Democrat who dyes their hair blue, but forgets to let it re-dye, and it fades, and looks like he was stuck in a porta-john. I'm just telling you to think.